is Deborah Cat from Deborah Cat Coaching, and you are listening to the Better Sex podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationship, and we hope that we will be inspiring more love and better sex worldwide. Today, I am so excited to talk to Erika. She is a writer, witch, sexual rebel who identifies as white, polyamorous, bisexual, cisgendered woman. She's a dominant leading switch and a sadomasochist. She is also the mother of two amazing adult children, executive level academic professional, and previously a monogamous wife of 20 years. Both and is her magic word. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But she is the founder of Desire Alchemy. She is a somatic sex and relationship coach, an initiated priestess who helps people use embodiment, storytelling, and ritual to transform the energy of their own unique desire to fuel for their lives of connection and passion. Her mission is to reignite and strengthen stale relationships, including the relationship with self, by cultivating true authenticity, practical skills, devotion, and delight. In her pursuit of deeper connection through language and embodiment, she earned an MFA in creative writing and trained as a sex and relationship coach in the Somatic Institute method. She has had the joy of more than a decade of connection, education, and service in the Seattle sex-positive community, where she served as a tasting talk and a guest educator, facilitator on topics ranging from hands-on skills, DS dynamics, sacred sexuality, and strategies for maintaining intimacy and connection in long-term relationships. She currently serves on the board of the Center for Sex-Positive Culture in Seattle. Her erotic writing appeared in the Seattle Erotic Arts Festival Literary Anthology in 2018 through 2020 and 2022. Her chapter, Light Your Fire, Ecstatic Embodiment to Fuel Your Desires, was featured in the Amazon #1 bestseller. Sacred Medicine, Mystical Practices for Ecstatic Living, and her chapter, Turn Yourself On, Embodiment Practices to Jumpstart Your Day, was featured in the Amazon bestseller, The Ultimate Guide for Self-Healing, Volume 5. That is an impressive bio. And I know that she is so much more than that. So I just want to welcome you and thank you so much for being a part of the Better Sex podcast. Welcome, Erika.
Thanks, Deborah.
So I read the official bio and I'm curious, what is your story? How did you get here?
Thanks. Well, my sexuality has been a defining part of who I am throughout my life. I grew up in a conservative Baptist household in the American Deep South. My parents have been married for 55 years, and my dad still grabs my mom's butt at the breakfast table. I spent my childhood immersed in romance novels and a never-ending series of boyfriends. In college in Birmingham, Alabama in the late 80s, I discovered myself as kinky and bisexual. I was the self-proclaimed condom fairy in my dorm, worked at Victoria's Secret, and committed myself to witchcraft as the spiritual path that resonated with my desire to honor and celebrate the feminine, sexuality, and nature. I was in a monogamous heterosexual marriage for 20 years, exploring the hotness of kink when I could seduce my husband into that mood, and feeding my desire solo by reading erotica. Mostly, however, I was busy as a mother of two and sole breadwinner for my family, often overwhelmed by exhaustion and loneliness. When we divorced in my early 40s, I discovered the local sex-positive community in Seattle. I was so nervous the first time I went to the Center for Sex-Positive Culture that my date and I sat in the car in the parking lot for half an hour before going inside. I was so relieved to find welcoming people just like us. In the last decade, I've learned things about my own authentic desire that I never imagined were true about me. And I've been able to explore desires I experienced early on that got left behind during my years of monogamous heterosexual marriage. I now identify as queer, polyamorous, dominant leaning switch. For me, sex is sometimes a deeply profound experience of physical pleasure and spiritual connection with my partner. Sometimes it's lighthearted play between friends, and sometimes it's an ordeal journey that helps me connect more deeply with myself, my partner, and the divine. I'm an enthusiastic supporter of every individual excavating, expressing, and exploring their own unique sexual desire as a pathway to greater vitality, joy, and connection. It's been a long journey, Deborah, but yeah, after 20 years of marriage and working in academia, I was really fortunate to get laid off during COVID. And now I get to focus my energy on this passion that I feel is so incredibly important for transforming the world. The kind of connection that we feel during sex and the kind of power that we get from our own sexual energy is really the key, I believe, to the kind of world I want my children to grow up in.
Thank you. I love that. So I had no idea that your background was Baptist South. And so, like, when I look at that and I
Mm,
feel into where you're at now, it's so very different. And what a fascinating journey you've had. So, I just want to start with God, there's so many different places to jump in, but I love the way that you identify yourself. There's a lot of different concepts in there. And I'm just curious if you can kind of give us a little bit of the definition, not so much by the book, but how you see yourself. When you say polyamorous, bisexual, cisgender, dominant leaning, switch, like what does that mean?
yeah, thanks for asking. I'm always anxious about even using those labels because I know it's a lot to unpack. But here we go. So, my queerness or bisexuality refers to the gender of the humans I'm attracted to sexually and romantically. And so, there's a spectrum. I'm sometimes anxious about using bisexual because I don't believe that gender is a binary, but the formal definition of bisexual as including more than one gender. So, I claim it. I am, however, a cisgendered woman. I was assigned female at birth, and I continue to identify as feminine. And so that makes me cisgendered woman. What else was on that list? Dominant
Dominant leaning switch.
Dominant leaning switch. Yes. So when I play with power arrangements in my sexual and romantic relationships, dominance is the person who makes the decisions for me, and
Mhm.
submissives are people who accept those decisions and carry them out with enthusiasm. um, yeah, and a switch is somebody who sometimes plays both roles. That can sometimes happen in the same relationship, and sometimes it happens in different relationships. So, at the moment, I identify as a dominant leaning switch because I do have a relationship. My nesting partner makes the decisions in our household, and so I identify as submissive within this relationship. But in all my other relationships, I am either dominant all the time or we switch. I switch and play with my partners, and sometimes they're in charge and sometimes I'm in charge. So it makes for a lot of fun for me. I like to say that I'm super greedy and I get to do all the things with all the people. So it's lots and lots of fun.
I
But
like that. Soup greedy with all the people. That's so good. I mean, and then yeah, I also just wanted you use the term nesting partner, and I just want to, if you could quickly let
unpack
us.
that a little. Yeah. So I have a partner who I live with. We're not married, but He is very important to me. Nesting partner to me identifies the fact that we share a home, but doesn't necessarily imply a hierarchy within among my relationships. So I have other romantic and sexual relationships with people who don't live in my house. But this person, especially during COVID, we're 24/7 in this space, and that gets more weight. So, yeah, that's what
That's
nesting partner means.
Thank you. And I know that's a word that so many people use differently. But I love your how it works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'm what's my official title? Publications content coordinator, I think, at the Center for Sex Positive Culture, which is a glorified newsletter editor sort of title. But we're actually working on building a member sourced dictionary of sex positive terminology right now that's similar to the Urban Dictionary type thing so that we can get these kinds of personal definitions so that folks can see the range of ways that people use these words because a single dictionary definition really doesn't do it.
Right, right. And I like to say there's no right way to do relationship. There's your way to do relationship. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
and I feel like especially in the polyamorous world where there is so much range and people do it their way, but it's good to have a common way of talking about things because we don't always pause long enough to ask, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. That's so true. And that is such an important question all the time.
Yeah. So when we were off camera, we were talking about not just, we were talking about words and their power. And we were also talking about the power of asking. And I have an idea of what I mean by that, but I'm curious, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So when I think about the power of asking, I guess part of this goes back to, as you mentioned at the very beginning, the journey that I've been on from growing up Baptist in the Deep South to being on the board of the Center for Sex Positive Culture in Seattle. It's been quite a journey. And I grew up with a certain set of expectations for what sex looked like and what was appropriate and in what kind of circumstances. And that kind of formed my maybe proto menu of what was really available in terms of sexuality, what would get me connection and love and all the good things in life versus what would get me judgment and isolation. And so I was pretty careful early in my life to not ask for the things that I secretly really, really wanted. But as I've gotten older and I think probably that first moment of freedom was within marriage. I felt like, okay, this is my person now. And now we get to explore. Now we get to do all the things. And so it really was an exercise in vulnerability and admitting to what went on inside my heart and inside my body and what really aroused me and got me off and some of those things we got to play out, but not all of them because my husband wasn't into all the things I was into. And so asking, but unless I was brave enough to share what it was, he would never know. And we would be stuck with that little proto menu of, and now we do the missionary and now we go to sleep. Or- and so, yeah, life opened up and life continues to open up because I'm continue to explore and find more new things that maybe this is fun. Let's try that. Yeah.
I'm really glad that you pointed to the reason behind our not asking, because I think it's really easy to be like, yes, you got to ask for what you want, and be a cheerleader for that. And recognizing that whether it's true or not, what it feels like is at stake when we ask for something, especially that might be off the normal proto menu, is that loss of community, that loss of tribe, that loss of beginning of belonging.
Yeah.
And as you've mentioned, it's so prevalent in our culture of bit color within the lines. And really, as you mentioned, it's like starting to find that, like the first question of, or the first piece of asking for desires, asking your own system what it's looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And being able to put into words for yourself what those desires are and connecting with the embodied feelings of, oh, I don't know, just longing and excitement and what it would feel like to have those things fulfilled and what it would feel like to share that part of yourself with another human
Yes.
because it is the relationship, it is that intimacy where really all that juiciness happens.
Hmm. As I look at your bio, and it's clear that while your beginnings of spiritual relationship was through the Baptist church, that it is a big part of who you are now. I'm wondering, I know this might be a little bit off topic from where we started, but I'm curious how sex and spirit come together for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you ask. It was a huge part of my sexuality was actually a huge part of me finding this spiritual path because when I was 18 and left my parents' house and went away to college, I really felt like that Father God in the sky had no idea what it was like to be me. And as a young woman experiencing sexual awakening, and so I intentionally went looking for a spiritual path that could embrace my sexuality and my sense of self as the feminine. And so I actually decided I was going to revive goddess worship, thinking I was the only person on the planet worshiping Diana. And I like came up with all of these rituals and practices on my own. And then a year later, I discovered Spiral Dance by Starhawk that was already in its 10th year anniversary publication and discovered, oh, wow, here's the language for all the things that I so deeply believed. And the way that what makes the world go round in terms of that embodied physical reality of nature is an erotic dance. It is the dance of the bee and the flower. It is the dance of procreation in every species. It is birth and life and death and rebirth every single time. And all of that is reflected in our sexuality. So for me, that practice is it's always an honoring and a celebration of the creative act of human sexuality and of the erotic dance of the cosmos. Yeah. So I do a lot of sex magic. It is a huge part of how I go about my day to day. The energy of orgasm will boost you right into outer space. And and it makes a lot of good things happen in the world. My partner often says, "Why are our houseplants so gorgeous and lush here?" I'm like, it's all those orgasms, honey. So
Well, and I
anyway.
love, I mean, my understanding of sex magic is really this is a place where you bring words and intention together with the embodied experience of that creative energy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the most powerful ways to raise energy to fuel any kind of intention is with rhythm. And so whether that's drumming or dancing or chanting or fucking, that rhythmic activity, it raises that energy and really puts that the oomph behind the intention and the words and any of the symbolic materia that is used or so it
Mhm.
really is an amplifier that increases the energy behind whatever intention you are trying to create in your life.
Absolutely. I love the idea of fucking as a rhythmic experience because I hadn't really thought about that, but like rhythm is a big part of what makes good sex.
Oh, yeah. Rhythm is a huge part of what makes a good spanking,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
right? And if you want to mess with somebody, try doing it out of rhythm. When you
Mm.
completely destroy their expectations, it's very disconcerting. And if you then drop back into rhythm again, the level of comfort and connection that just washes over both of you is so amazing.
And are you a drummer?
A little bit.
Mhm.
Only religiously, not musically.
Got it. I want to come back to words and asking and desire and how those kind of come together.
Yeah. For me, I think one of the keys to making asking work for me, there have been two big parts. One has been learning to really ask vulnerably for what I want by sharing my desire. That I struggled early on with asking because I often phrased things in ways that sounded like blame or shame or complaining to my
Mm.
partner that they weren't doing it right. And learning to share without expectation what was hot for me and what I wanted with them and how much I enjoy and appreciate them. And let's have more of that really helped shift the whole tone of those kinds of conversations and brought us closer together instead of creating conflict, which was my early experience with asking.
Can you give me an example of how you might ask with desire versus ask with complaint?
Sure. Asking with desire sounds something like, would you please pinch my nipples? That feels so good when you do that. Versus, right? Versus, how come you never pinch my nipples? You know that that feels good.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like I like to say that everything you practice in bed can be practiced in outside of the bedroom as well.
Yeah.
And I just, it's funny. I had this conversation with my partner the other night. We were talking about chores, and that did not go well. But this morning, I was in a better, like more desirable place, as it were. And
Mhm.
so the conversation was more started with, like, I have this desire to feel yummy in my house. And I really have desire to feel like you hold that as important to you as well. And I'm wondering where we could find where that bridge is for you. Like, what would you like to contribute to that?
Hell yeah.
And he was like, I can't talk about this now. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, and that's sometimes the answer we get, and sometimes you and I talked about this a little bit earlier too, because that actually opens me to the second piece of asking, which is expanding our own capacity to sometimes hear either, "Let's wait on that," or just a straight up no, because that can feel really judgy and rejection, and that it can be really hard to hear that. And so often that leads us to not ask because we're afraid that that's what we might hear. And so doing our own work to help depersonalize the no or the let's wait, because hearing the tone in your voice, it sounds like you knew he was busy with other things and you'd get back to it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and that is just like he has a longer answering pattern than I do. I'm like, I feel it, it's a yes or a no. It's a
Hmm.
mm-hmm, mm-mm. But for him, he's got to like filter through all of the different options and what it might mean. And if he commits to this, like if he says yes, is he committed for, it's more of a process, which I think is super funny in that it's not what we tend to think of as, like, I would say I have a more direct yes or no. He has a more winding yes or no.
Yeah. But I love that you share the kind of intimacy where you know those things about each other and can give each other the space and grace to be who you really are in that communication pattern,
Thank you.
right? Because you might have responded to that as, you never want to talk about the things I want to talk about.
Well, that
And
was last night's conversation.
right. And that's the other piece of this. We are all messy, imperfect humans, and we can strive to always be in this place of desire and connection. And we're not going to succeed because we are messy, imperfect humans. And so, how do we then repair? How do we recover? How did you come back this morning and approach it again better rested, more grounded, and more able to really connect with him and give him some patience and space rather than continuing down the road of destruction.
Well, it's funny hearing you ask that question. I was much more in my own turn on. I was
Mhm.
much more like in my morning practices. So I was just in this space where I'd had enough time with myself. I wouldn't quite call it sex magic, but like I'd sat, I'd raised some energy and I knew what my intention for the day going in is, here's what I know, here's what I don't know. Just make it a beautiful day of connection is my sort of morning prayer. And so I asked him from that place. And it's so funny saying this out loud. I'm like, oh, right. That
Yeah,
thing I always talk to my clients about.
exactly. Exactly. We do talk to our clients about these things. And yeah, but we're not perfect either. We're all still just human and we're growing and learning and practicing every single day.
I would love you to talk a little bit about the power of no, both on the expression side of that and on the reception side of that, if you would.
Yeah. The power of no is actually something that I'm working on for myself these days. I grew up as a little bit of a people pleaser, and it was really hard for me to embrace my own no. And I ended up really overcommitted often by saying yes to many, many things, many of which I was actually a no to, or at best a maybe. And so, really embracing being able to feel in my body and being courageous enough to share, no, that's not okay with me. That's not a thing I want right now. That doesn't feel good. And being able to share that, but sharing it lovingly, that the thing that my partner has asked for is wrong or bad or anything like that, it's just not something I can fulfill right
Mhm.
now, right here, or maybe ever. And that's up to me to share it. But yeah, and hearing no has also been a long time coming. And I struggled with rejection early in my life, especially. But now I am practicing celebrating other people's no, because
Mm.
that means that they're honoring their own boundaries. And that means I can trust their yes.
Oh, so
If somebody tells me
good.
no, that means their yes is for real when I do get it. And that is precious to me. That is super precious. I also find that playing with safe words has helped with this as well, because one thing I know for myself is that I really love playing to people's edges. And so I use yellow and red as safe words in
Mhm.
play. And I like to play to my own edges too. And so I want to play till I'm a yellow, till I need to slow down. I need to check in. I need that point of reconnection. And then maybe we can go harder again until I've finally hit that red point where
Mhm.
I've had enough. And so that practice in feeling like that call to slow down or the call to stop or feeling like a no is not a personal attack. It's not anything about me or them. It just is right now. And that has really helped me stretch my capacity to both say no and hear no in relationship or in sexual contexts.
And hearing you say that, I'm thinking, wow, that is not even, I think when I look back at negotiation, I might actually ask a person, because, we have the boundary talk, we have the
Hmm.
safe word talk, but
Yeah.
I'm like, my intention is rarely to push somebody's boundaries or
Hmm.
to push somebody's edge in that
Hmm.
way. Like, I'm just thinking to myself, like, how does the conversation change when say to somebody, what I'm really looking for is to feel the edge of my boundary or to feel versus playing in the center.
Right, exactly. Well, and it creates a situation of really high personal responsibility on both sides and makes a really clear expectation, because I've played with bottoms or subs who feel like it's their job to let me do whatever I want to them, and they will suffer through things that are way past their desire.
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want to use their safe word because they feel like that's a failure. And
Right.
so when I share with them at the beginning, I want to hear your safe word. That is part of my goal here. That gives them the freedom to actually stay with their true yes, to actually share with me when they're hitting that edge so that we can flirt with that boundary. And of course, when I tell them that at the beginning, they can say, no, I don't want to play like that. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But then that means I have to be a lot more cautious because I know that I might not hear them tell me when they're hitting their edges. Another thing I use when I play hard is the pain scale that you
Mm-hmm.
often hear at the ER. 0 to 10 on a scale of 0 to 10, where's your pain? And so at the beginning of any play session, we calibrate because
Mm-hmm.
bodies change moment to moment, day to day. I can take a lot less when I'm on my menstrual cycle, for instance, than on an ordinary day. And so I want to know, does this spank feel like a 2 or does it feel like an 8 right now? And then the next question is, what is your sweet spot? Where do you like to play?
Right.
I like to play at an 8, but I have partners who like to play at a 3. Okay, we can do that. But it gives me that information. And then we can check in regularly while we're playing. Where did that land for you? So that we can make sure that we're on the same page with what's happening in both bodies.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore, because I think this is true not just in the sort of kink world, but
Yeah.
in the sensual world in general. And I know
Hmm.
that a lot of times male partners are confused because, wow, that thing I did to you just yesterday was the thing. And, but for whatever reason, yes, my body responded like that yesterday.
Hmm.
Today my nipples are just like over the top sensitive. Today I'm really more like, I'm more in a wrestle mood. I'm more in a like hold me mood. So I love the idea of asking your partner, where is your body today? What is it? And it's always from a little bit of a kink dom perspective. Like, I love having people talk to me about their bodies and
Mm.
describe in great detail the sensations, because one of the things I've noticed about, using words is that we turn ourselves on with them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually, I consider words to be my only true fetish. So if the definition of fetish is something you can't have an orgasm without, yeah, words are that for me. And so I tell my partners, if you're not talking when I want to come, I'm imagining you talking because that's the only way I come. And I have a little mental Rolodex of different phrases and different scenarios where people are saying different things to me. And just like physical sensations, sometimes one particular phrase or story works and sometimes it doesn't. And so I'll scroll through till I hit one that is that day's thing. But yeah,
Oh
and
my God, that is so good.
yeah. And after, especially if I'm playing with a partner and I'm having to scroll through to think about the thing they said in my head to actually have that orgasm, afterwards, I'll tell them. So while I was coming, what I was thinking about was you saying, my body would obey you, or whatever it was, right? Whatever I was thinking in that
Mhm.
moment, just so that they can then tuck that in their Rolodex and actually say it. Whenever it strikes their fancy.
That's so good, because again, it's like telling your partner, these are the things that turn me on. I think it's one of the biggest things that I run up against in working with couples is this idea that we are supposed to be able to know what our partner wants.
Yeah.
And particularly, I see this with women not really articulating what they want and then being resentful that their partner doesn't give it to them.
Yeah. My partner likes to say that I should teach a master class on that, actually, in terms of just using back scratching instructions as the kind of the model. He's like, when you tell me how to touch you in all these different ways, Like, it's the same amount of charge as when you're trying to direct me where on your back needs scratching. It's like up a little, down a little. No, no, over. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Right.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. I
Yeah.
love that.
And of course, he doesn't know where the itch is. I can't possibly expect him to know where the itch is. And sexually, exactly the same. Why would he know exactly how I'm receiving that sensation? He doesn't. I have to tell him.
God, this is such a juicy conversation. Thank you so much for being willing to hop on with me. So, we've gone all sorts of different places, but I'm curious if there's one thing that you want people to get out of our conversation here today, what might that be?
I would say the only real limit on sexuality is informed consent between adults, which means being able to talk about desire and ask for what you really want.
So good. So, do you want to tell us what you're up to and where we can find more of you?
Absolutely. I will be at the Seattle Erotic Arts Festival this coming weekend doing sexy conversations using a really cool card deck that I developed to guide these kinds of conversations. So do come see me in person there if you can. I'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I'll be reading from the story that's being published in this year's literary anthology at 5 o'clock on Saturday night. Beyond that, you can find me on the web at www.desirealchemy.com. And I have all kinds of juicy stuff going on. I'm also going to be featured in another book that will probably be coming out in August, I think, called Wealth Codes, which is fascinating actually, because it's wealth codes, sacred strategies for abundance. And it's another collaborative book with 25 authors. And it posits that wealth comes from a variety of places in our lives. It's not just money, and relationships is one of those key areas. So you
Mm.
can check out my chapter in Wealth Codes later this year. But do come see me on the web. You can find me on Facebook at Eirikah Delaunay, and I'll be happy to chat.
Oh, so good. And of course, all of the links will be in the show notes. Again, Erika, thank you so very much for your time and your energy. And this wraps up our episode of the Better Sex Podcast. If you want to help spread more love and better sex worldwide, please like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you might get your podcast from. Have a wonderful rest of your day.